How do we act like it when 30% of our revenue comes from a federal government that tells us itself it's unsustainable?
Just say no.
That's the key question. Well, just say no, but you almost need a methadone program to get off of the heroin, right? I mean, if you just say no, people will be hurt tremendously. But also what we know, and again, this is Erskine Bowles, Clinton White House Chief of Staff, he says, no, we face the most predictable economic crisis in history. That was Erskine Bowles that President Obama appointed to the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. Problems are real, solutions are painful, we have to act. So in Utah, we formed a federal funds commission on the website, federal risk at le.utah.gov. You can go in and put all kinds of risks, interest rate, dollar crash, all kinds of things, see what the impact is on direct and indirect funds to Utah, look at the ways to respond to that risk and how much pain it would take to respond to those risks. That's just up in the last 2 weeks. We're the only state in the nation beginning to assess what does it take to get there. Because we know it's a critical question. How do we take care of sick people, poor people, roads, and public safety when, not if, federal funds continue, not start, they're already diminishing. When federal funds continue to diminish, how do we take care of our people in our neighborhoods? It certainly broadens the base, right? I mean, that's exactly what brought me to that question.
$14.51 that we're not getting.
I came into this as an economics guy, right? I didn't come in as a lands guy. I came in as an economics guy. I was, mayor's office of the city of Osaka. They said, I got to Osaka. I'm working in the mayor's office of the city of Osaka. Second week on the job. They say, glad to have you here. Most important bilateral relationship in the world. This is in the mid to late 80s. They said, but just so you know, we're looking to China because you all have broken the basic law of economics in the United States. Basic law of economics, you produce more than you consume, you invest the difference in additional production capacity. Your deficit spending, history tells us you're on the way out. We're looking to China. This is in the 1980s. It just ticked me off, but that kind of set me on the course. I was like 1 or 2 classes away from an economics double at BYU, and so I just kind of geeked on international political economy forward, and it's that economics. But yeah, I mean, how do we do that? These are not easy questions, but it's a math question. American Institute of CPAs, this is just math. Utah Association of CPAs, this is math, not politics. So we have to look at these things, it's critical. So to your question, how then? We know the what, so how, okay? How many of you have ever been in a tug of war before? Ever done a tug of war in your life? Pretty much everybody? Pretty much everybody, right? Okay, so let's suppose I get 14 of you up here, and I get you to raise your hand and swear that you're going to pull on the rope. You promise. I solemnly swear I'm going to pull on the rope no matter what. Okay? Right? And we tie the flag in the middle and we say, okay, let's divide into teams, and 13 of you go to one side and only one goes to the other. How do you think that's going to work out? Not too well. How come? It'll work out well for the 13. Why do you say that?
No competition.
No competition. It's no competition, right? But the biggest guy in the room is the one on the other side. He's the biggest guy in the room. Do you still say no competition? Still why? Still no competition. 13 against 1, no competition, he says. You agree with him?
Depends on the side of the depends.
Yeah, he's a human, right? Okay. Even still, does it depend on the size of the one? If you had Andre the Giant as the one and you had 13 on the other side, what do you think? The 13 still win? 13 still win, even with Andre the Giant, okay?
It's still got a competition.
So now let's say, now you say, okay, on your mark, get set, go. Oh, I forgot an important part. The important part is this isn't like the tug of war where you pull one side to the other. This tug of war is kind of special. This is where you just keep that flag balanced right in the middle. Now, do you think they could do that? Depends on if they don't pull too hard, right? If the 13 pull too hard. But if they all agree that they're going to pull and keep that flag balanced, they think they can do it. Right, no problem, right? Big guy, no problem. 13 really. So if you'd ask the 13, do they have to pull very hard? They don't have to pull very hard, right? They could probably do it all day long. So now suppose that one by one the 13 start dropping off the rope. And you go to the first one and you say, hey, where are you going? Oh, there's so many people here, they don't need me. And the next one drops off the rope and he says, I got so many things to do, I don't have time to pull on this rope. And the next one drops off the rope and he says, I forgot why we were pulling on this rope in the first place. And the next one drops off the rope and he says, you know, I'm afraid I might look funny up here pulling on the rope. And the next one drops off and says, I'm afraid what people might say about me if I pull on this rope. And now there's fewer and fewer, and the next one drops off and says, you know, that big guy's paying me to not pull on the rope. And as more and more drop off, they say, I'm getting scared of the big guy, I'm letting go. And pretty soon they've all dropped the rope and it's all sitting at the feet of the big guy. What do you do now? How many of you think the answer would be to get a really nice, benevolent big guy to push on the rope? Would that work?
The little guys on the other side.
You gotta get the other guys back over to grab the rope, and they gotta pull. And they have to pull. They have to pull always. They have to pull together. They don't have to pull hard, but they have to always pull. That's our system. That's how this has to work, right? You have to get states starting to understand that federalism and this balance in our system is not just one state standing up, but first of all, we have to understand our rights. We have to hire people that would do what you would do. Do you think if you were the governor, you would teach people about these things? If you were the member of Congress, would you teach people about these things? Would you teach in your districts? Would you then work with your colleagues? Would you work with your colleagues in other states? If you were the state representative or the attorney general, what would you do with this information? Now, who do they work for? They work for you. They work for you.
Is this one of the reasons that Utah is one of the 8 states that did federal J.D. Helm exercise went on out here in the summer?
The question is this: why Utah's one of
being
the
perceived as a state government's going to stand up?
question is this the reason why Utah was one of the places where Jade Helm was done? One of the 8 states? I don't know. No idea. Supreme Court 2 years ago, our nation was and is a union of states. I would encourage you to refamiliarize yourself with that word union. Union. Our nation was and is a union of states, equal in dignity, power, and authority. The constitutional equality of the states is essential to the harmonious operation of the republic. Constitutional equality. We talked about this last time. For those of you that weren't here, we'll go over it again just briefly. What do these have in common? Richard Sherman, I love this story. Did any of you watch that game? It's an incredible game, right? Richard Sherman's just bent over the whole time. NFC Championship game. He gets his arm just hammered, and he's just grimacing. And he's such a great player. He's so fun to watch. But he doesn't come out of the game. If you're exploitable, you will be exploited. That's what we see so here's the PILT, the payment in lieu of taxes. Farm Bill just a little over a year ago, 2014. Congress wants to grow because it's the nature and disposition of man and government to amass unbridled power, whether it's man or government, and if it's not checked, that's what they're going to do. That's why we have these checks. That's why our system was set up that way. In the Farm Bill, so payment in lieu of taxes, right? Federal government knew it was supposed to transfer the land. We talked about that last time, right? We saw the history from 1780 all the way forward. It wasn't until 1976 Congress said, hey, we're just going to keep this land. They have no authority to just change the statehood deal, but they said, but we're going to give you a promise that we'll give you payment in lieu of the taxes you would otherwise generate if we had kept the same promise with you that we kept with all states east of the Rockies. Payment in lieu of taxes. How that works out is they pay whatever they feel like, whenever they feel like, instead of you being able to govern yourself and control your destiny. Great deal, right? So in 2014, they hadn't made the PILT payments, the payment in lieu of taxes. It wasn't in the budget. It wasn't in the continuing resolution. And because government wants to grow, and if there's a weak spot that they can exploit, like Richard Sherman, and they're going to exploit it, they put $756 billion in the Farm Bill, $200 billion in farm subsidies, $756 billion in increased food stamps. Don't care what you think about either of those programs. They should stand or fall on their own merits. But they held those hostage for $400 million of PILT payments that educate people in your counties, police and fire and roads and public safety. For $400 million, they secured the Western votes to increase government by $1 trillion. Constitutional equality of the states is essential to the harmonious operation of the republic. You understand what those have in common now, right? So Thomas Jefferson said, this line, it must be done by the states themselves, erecting barriers at the constitutional line that cannot be surmounted. James Wilson, who was, well, this is John Adams. John Adams, this is during the Revolutionary period. He's talking to Thomas Hutchinson, the governor of Massachusetts, and they're talking about, hey, no, we've got to sort out this idea of power, and who has what power, and we've got to allocate that and make that secure. And Thomas Hutchinson said, there can be no line. And Adams said, if there be no line, we must be mere vassals, or we must be totally independent. James Wilson again signed the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, original member of the Supreme Court. Our Constitution deserves praise for the accuracy with which the line is drawn between the powers of the general government and those of the particular states. The powers are as minutely enumerated and defined as was possible. And as we saw at the very beginning, until 1930, we knew that. FDR knew that. It took only 3% of GDP to operate our entire federal government for 150 years. But where there is no line, then there is no limit. Where there is no limit, then there is no liberty. That line is crucial. Supreme Court, independent power of the states, we looked at that. Jurisdiction, we looked at that. I want to just cover this for just a little bit and go through this. So jurisdiction, right? Remember in our page here, back on number 11, our cases refer to this general power of governing possessed by the states but not the federal government as the police power. Again, health, safety, welfare is what that term of art police power means. And then if you look down to 14, the framers ensured that the powers which in the ordinary course of affairs concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people were held by governments more local and accountable than a distant federal bureaucracy. So jurisdiction, let's just remind ourselves what that is. Jurisdiction, the legal power or authority of doing justice in cases, the power of governing. The power or right of exercising authority. The power of governing. Jurisdiction possessed by the states but not the federal government. So jurisdiction. In the 1950s, in the Eisenhower administration, there was a state that had a large VA complex, Veterans Complex. Under Article 1, Section 817 of the Constitution we talked about last time, Congress has exclusive legislation, exclusive jurisdiction over District of Columbia and all places purchased with the consent of the legislature for specific, typically military purposes. The VA compound falls within that. It was exclusive legislation, jurisdiction. The federal government was the government within the state of the VA compound. You with me? So because of that, there was the local municipality was providing police and fire and education, but they weren't paying any taxes to people on the VA compound. They weren't paying any taxes to support the public services. And so the local municipality said, we're not going to provide any more service. You're the exclusive government, you take care of it. And in the Eisenhower administration, they got kind of exercised by that. And they said, wait, can they do that? We've got to understand this line, this jurisdiction. We have to understand this. And so President Eisenhower and his cabinet, which of course you know included also Ezra Taft Benson as the Department of Agriculture, they ordered the U.S. Attorney General, who also then got the Comptroller General, and 33 federal agencies, and all of the states' attorneys general to study this question. Jurisdiction over federal areas within the states. That sounds pretty important, don't you think? They did a study, the 2-volume study. The first volume was a policy brief, 350 pages, volume 1, to the policymaker. The second volume, volume 2, these are available on our website, AmericanLandsCouncil.org. The second, volume 2, was a legal brief. They reviewed over 1,000 cases, every journal, every article, everything they could find. They said it was the